Have you ever wondered why a seemingly devoted husband suddenly destroys everything he's built with his family, throwing away years of love and commitment for what appears to be nothing more than a fleeting moment of pleasure? What invisible force could possibly drive someone to betray the person they once promised to cherish forever? The answers to these haunting questions lie far deeper than most people dare to look. What I'm about to share with you today will completely transform how you understand betrayal, infidelity, and the mysterious workings of karma in our relationships. Because according to the profound spiritual insights of Edgar Cayce, one of history's most gifted psychics and healers, nothing in our love lives happens by accident, especially the most painful experiences that seem to tear our world apart. You see, when we witness or experience marital betrayal, we're not just looking at a simple case of weakness, temptation, or moral failure. We're actually glimpsing into the complex spiritual machinery that governs our souls across multiple lifetimes. Has this ever happened to you? Have you found yourself asking why good people sometimes make devastating choices that destroy everything they claim to value? But before we begin, please hit the like button and let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the world. And if you haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of our future videos. The truth is that every act of infidelity carries within it the echoes of ancient spiritual debts, unresolved conflicts that stretch back through previous incarnations, and sacred contracts made in the spirit world before we ever took our first breath in this lifetime. Edgar Cayce revealed that many of the relationship challenges we face today, particularly those involving betrayal and broken trust, actually stem from agreements our souls made long before we incarnated into these physical bodies. Imagine for a moment that before you were born, your spirit sat down with other souls, including the very person who would one day become your spouse, and carefully planned out the lessons you would need to learn together. What you're about to discover might surprise you, but these pre-birth spiritual contracts often include provisions for the most painful experiences, because sometimes our souls can only heal ancient wounds by experiencing both sides of betrayal. When someone cheats on their partner, they're not just breaking a promise made at the altar. They're actually breaking a much deeper, more sacred commitment that was forged in the spiritual realm. And this is why the pain of betrayal cuts so much deeper than physical injury, because it tears at the very fabric of agreements our spirits made with absolute trust and divine love. Stay with me until the end, because what we're about to explore together will reveal the hidden spiritual forces that drive people to betray those they love most. And more importantly, how understanding these karmic patterns can transform your deepest pain into profound spiritual awakening. Now, I want to go even deeper into this hidden truth that most people completely miss when they're trying to understand why betrayal happens. Because what we're really looking at goes far beyond simple character flaws or momentary weakness. The conventional wisdom tells us that infidelity is just about lack of self-control, poor moral choices, or giving in to temptation. But that perspective barely scratches the surface of what's actually happening behind the scenes of these devastating decisions. When Edgar Cayce examined cases of marital betrayal through his extraordinary psychic abilities, he discovered something that completely transforms how we understand these painful situations. He found that many unfaithful spouses are actually being driven by forces they don't even consciously recognize. Think about it for a moment. Have you ever noticed how someone can seem genuinely confused by their own behavior? Almost as if they're watching themselves make choices that contradict everything they claim to believe in. This isn't about making excuses for harmful actions, but rather understanding the profound spiritual mechanics at work. What looks like a simple moral failure on the surface is often the manifestation of unresolved emotional debts that have been carried across multiple lifetimes. These ancient imbalances create an unconscious compulsion, a restless energy that pushes people toward situations that seem to offer resolution but often create even more complexity. The most fascinating revelation from Cayce's work is how these unconscious drives connect directly to what he called sacred marriage contracts. Every time two people decide to build a life together, they're not just making a commitment in this physical reality. According to these spiritual insights, they're actually fulfilling agreements that were carefully negotiated in the spirit world before either of them incarnated into these human bodies. This means that the person who betrays their spouse isn't just breaking a promise made during a wedding ceremony. They're violating a much deeper, more sacred contract that involved careful planning, divine witness, and spiritual commitment that transcends anything we can fully comprehend in our current human consciousness. When this betrayal happens, it creates ripples that extend far beyond the immediate pain and devastation we can see. The impact of breaking these pre-birth agreements doesn't just affect this lifetime. It actually creates new karmic debts that will need to be resolved, either later in this incarnation or in future lives. This is why the pain of betrayal feels so much deeper than other types of hurt, because our souls recognize when something sacred has been shattered. Understanding this spiritual framework doesn't minimize the very real anguish that betrayal causes, but it does offer a completely different lens for processing these experiences. It reveals that what appears to be random cruelty might actually be part of a much larger spiritual journey that both souls agreed to undertake together. Write in the comments, "I'm ready to understand," if this perspective is opening your mind to possibilities you'd never considered before. Now, here's where this journey becomes even more revelatory, because the moment of physical betrayal that devastates marriages isn't actually where the real breakdown begins. What Edgar Cayce discovered through his spiritual investigations shows us that infidelity starts much earlier, in a place most people never think to look, within the invisible landscape of thoughts and emotions that precede every action we take in the physical world. The transformation from faithful spouse to betrayer happens through a gradual process that begins in the mind. It starts with small compromises in thinking, poorly nourished fantasies that are allowed to grow unchecked, and a silent retreat from authentic connection with both oneself and one's partner. This internal shift is often disguised as a quest for freedom or excitement, but it's actually a sophisticated form of self-sabotage that the person engaging in it rarely recognizes. What makes this pattern so difficult to interrupt is that the individual going through this process genuinely doesn't understand what's driving their decisions. They're being influenced by unconscious spiritual forces that operate beneath the level of their everyday awareness. This revelation completely changes how we understand the mindset of someone who betrays their marriage, because it reveals that their actions aren't necessarily coming from a place of deliberate cruelty or calculated evil. Sometimes what we're witnessing is profound spiritual weakness, a soul that simply doesn't have the strength in this lifetime to resist the pull of unresolved karmic patterns. This doesn't excuse the devastating impact of their choices, but it does provide a framework for understanding why fundamentally good people can make decisions that seem completely contrary to their stated values and apparent character. The most fascinating aspect of these situations involves what Cayce called karmic reunions. Many cases of infidelity actually represent spirits who were entangled in complicated love triangles during previous incarnations, returning to this lifetime with an unconscious desire to heal what they previously destroyed. The challenge is that they often lack the spiritual maturity or strength needed to navigate these complex emotional territories successfully this time around. These souls might feel an inexplicable, almost magnetic pull towards someone outside their marriage, not understanding that this attraction is actually their spirit's attempt to resolve ancient emotional debts. The person they're drawn to might represent someone they hurt in a past life, or someone who hurt them, creating a powerful but confusing energetic connection that can override their conscious commitment to their current spouse. Behind the scenes of what appears to be a simple case of wandering attention or selfish desire, there's often this intricate spiritual choreography playing out, where souls are attempting to balance accounts that were left unfinished in previous existences. The tragedy is that without conscious awareness of these deeper dynamics, they frequently create even more karmic complexity instead of achieving the resolution their spirits are seeking. Write in the comments, "I see the pattern now," if you're starting to recognize how these invisible forces might be operating in situations you've witnessed or experienced. Now, here's what completely revolutionizes our understanding of these devastating relationship dynamics. Edgar Cayce revealed that marriage isn't just a social contract or romantic arrangement. It's actually a sacred school designed specifically for the spiritual evolution of both souls involved. Every marriage represents a carefully crafted curriculum where each partner provides the exact experiences the other soul needs for growth, healing, and transformation. When someone chooses infidelity, they're essentially dropping out of the most important class they've ever enrolled in. The lesson they're avoiding isn't just about being loyal to another person. It's about developing fidelity to their own spirit, learning to honor commitments that represent their deepest capacity for integrity, truth, and spiritual evolution. The betrayal becomes a form of self-sabotage that extends far beyond the immediate relationship damage. If you're drawn to these deeper spiritual insights about relationships and personal transformation, I'd love to have you subscribe to the channel. There's so much more to explore about how these invisible forces shape our love lives, and I want to make sure you're part of this journey of understanding. What makes this even more profound is how karma orchestrates these learning experiences through role reversals across lifetimes. The woman who finds herself devastated by her husband's betrayal today might have been the one causing that same anguish to someone else in a previous incarnation. The man who abandons his family for another woman might have experienced the crushing pain of abandonment himself in a past life. This isn't about cosmic punishment, it's about spiritual education through direct experience. Life's wisdom operates on the principle that we can only truly understand what we've personally lived through. The soul that caused betrayal needs to feel betrayal. The spirit that abandoned others needs to experience abandonment. This creates a complete understanding that transforms surface-level knowledge into deep cellular wisdom that can guide future choices. Behind many cases of infidelity lies a profound fear of the vulnerability that authentic love requires. The person seeking escape through extramarital relationships often carries invisible wounds from past experiences where deep love led to devastating loss. Their current betrayal becomes a protective mechanism, a way to maintain emotional distance even while appearing to be in an intimate relationship. The journey toward genuine intimacy demands that we face our deepest fears, heal our oldest wounds, and develop the courage to love without guarantees. Some souls simply aren't ready for that level of spiritual intensity in this lifetime. They unconsciously create chaos and drama as a way to avoid the quiet, consistent work of building something real and lasting with another person. This fear-based mindset creates a cycle where the very thing they're seeking, authentic connection and love, becomes impossible to achieve because they keep sabotaging the relationships that could provide it. The impact of these decisions reverberates through multiple lifetimes, as each act of betrayal creates new karmic debts that must eventually be balanced. Understanding these hidden patterns doesn't excuse harmful behavior, but it does reveal the complex spiritual machinery operating behind what appears to be simple selfishness or moral failure. Write in the comments, "My eyes are opening," if these revelations are helping you see relationship challenges from an entirely new perspective. Now here's perhaps the most paradoxical revelation from Edgar Cayce's spiritual insights. Sometimes the journey toward authentic spirituality can only begin after we've completely destroyed what we thought we treasured most. There are individuals who remain spiritually asleep until they create such devastating consequences that they have no choice but to face the deeper truths they've been avoiding their entire lives. The transformation that follows genuine repentance becomes a portal for spiritual rescue, when someone finally recognizes the full magnitude of pain they've caused through their betrayal, when they experience the crushing weight of having lost what was truly precious, their soul can awaken to its higher purpose. This awakening doesn't happen through comfortable circumstances or gradual enlightenment. It erupts through the shattering impact of their own destructive decisions. What Edgar Cayce discovered about divine mercy completely changes how we understand these painful situations. According to his spiritual revelations, wherever there exists sincere repentance, the universe plants seeds of mercy and redemption. The issue isn't that people make mistakes, it's that they repeat the same harmful patterns without developing consciousness about their behavior. When infidelity becomes a repetitive pattern rather than a single devastating error, the spirit begins to stagnate and accumulate increasingly heavy karmic debts. Behind the scenes of even the most convincing justifications and rationalizations, the betrayer's spirit experiences constant inner turmoil. No matter how successfully they might appear to move on, no matter how many excuses they construct or how much external validation they receive, something deep inside continues to scream. It's the voice of conscience that, even when buried under layers of denial and self-deception, never completely silences. This internal voice represents the soul's authentic knowledge of right and wrong. Operating independently of what the ego wants to believe, the betrayer might convince themselves that they deserve happiness, that their spouse didn't appreciate them, or that they were trapped in an unfulfilling situation. But beneath all these mental constructions, their spirit knows the truth about what they've done and the pain they've caused. The impact of this inner conflict creates a constant state of spiritual unrest that manifests in countless ways: restlessness, anxiety, a persistent sense that something is missing, or an inability to experience genuine peace and contentment. The person might achieve external success, find new relationships, or create elaborate life changes, but the internal discord continues because the fundamental spiritual debt remains unaddressed. This is why many people who betray their spouses find themselves repeatedly creating similar patterns in subsequent relationships. The external circumstances change, but the internal spiritual imbalance remains, driving them toward the same destructive decisions until they develop the courage to face their authentic spiritual condition. The conscience that demands reparation isn't trying to torture the individual. It's attempting to guide them back toward their own spiritual integrity and authentic peace. Write in the comments, "I feel this truth," if you're recognizing how these invisible spiritual forces operate in the deepest parts of human experience. Now, while we've been exploring the spiritual forces that drive betrayal, there's another crucial dimension to understand: the tremendous power and choice available to the person who has been betrayed. Because within the devastation of discovering infidelity, there exists a profound opportunity for spiritual transformation that many people never realize they possess. The woman who discovers her husband's betrayal stands at one of the most significant crossroads of her spiritual journey. She can choose the path of forgiveness and attempt to rebuild, or she can choose the path of departure and rebuilding elsewhere. According to Edgar Cayce's spiritual insights, both responses can be completely correct depending on what her soul needs for its evolution. The crucial factor isn't which decision she makes, but how she makes it. What determines the spiritual impact of her choice is whether she allows the pain of betrayal to transform into hatred and bitterness. When someone becomes consumed by the desire for revenge, they bind their spirit to the very past that wounded them, creating a spiritual prison that prevents growth and perpetuates negative karmic cycles. The hatred becomes more destructive to the person carrying it than it ever could be to its intended target. The path of transcendence represents one of the most challenging spiritual tests available to human consciousness. It's remarkably easy to retaliate when you've been deeply wounded. Our natural instincts scream for justice, for the betrayer to suffer as much as we have suffered. But choosing transcendence, selecting dignity even through tears, requires accessing a level of spiritual strength that most people don't know they possess. The woman who chooses this elevated response isn't being weak or passive. She's demonstrating the most powerful force in the universe, which is conscious choice over unconscious reaction. Her decision to respond with grace rather than vengeance breaks karmic cycles that might have been repeating for lifetimes, freeing both herself and the person who betrayed her from patterns that could otherwise continue indefinitely. Behind this entire process operates what Edgar Cayce recognized as divine time, the greatest redemption instrument that exists in spiritual reality. The universe doesn't approve of adultery, but it also doesn't condemn the spirit that makes these devastating mistakes. Instead, divine wisdom offers time, patience, and the inevitable revelation of all hidden truths. Nothing remains concealed forever in the spiritual realm. Every lie told, every secret kept, every moment of deception eventually comes to light. Not through human investigation, but through the natural unfolding of spiritual law. While truth can cause tremendous pain when it emerges, lies create a far more toxic impact, poisoning the soul of the betrayer from within and creating spiritual corruption that affects every aspect of their being. The mindset of someone living with hidden betrayal becomes increasingly compromised as the weight of deception accumulates. Write in the comments, "I choose transcendence," if you're ready to embrace the spiritual power available to those who respond to pain with conscious choice rather than unconscious reaction. Now, here's what most people never understand about the true cost of betrayal. The poison of infidelity doesn't primarily damage the person being cheated on. According to Edgar Cayce's profound spiritual insights, the contamination first spreads through the consciousness of the one carrying out the deception. While the unfaithful person might maintain a convincing external facade, something fundamental breaks inside their spiritual core from the very first moment of betrayal. The emptiness that begins to pursue them isn't just guilt or fear of being caught. It's the soul's recognition that it has severed its connection to authentic truth and integrity. The pleasure they seek in another person's body represents a desperate but ultimately failed attempt to fill a void that was actually created by their own spiritual disconnection. No external experience can repair internal spiritual damage, which is why many betrayers find themselves trapped in increasingly compulsive behavior patterns. If this perspective on the spiritual mechanics of relationships has shifted something inside you, go ahead and hit that like button. It helps me know that this type of profound, soul-level content is serving you and should continue to be part of what I share. Behind the scenes of repeated infidelity lies a profound spiritual ruin that develops gradually over time. These individuals aren't necessarily evil in their core nature. Often they're simply lost souls who have forgotten how to love authentically or speak truthfully, even to themselves. They become refugees within their own consciousness, constantly seeking in others an escape from the honest reflection that committed marriage naturally provides. The ego mind has a powerful preference for flight over genuine self-examination. When marriage begins to function as a mirror, revealing aspects of character that need growth and healing, some people unconsciously choose chaos and drama over the patient work of transformation. The impact of this choice creates a downward spiral where each act of betrayal makes the next one easier to justify and harder to resist. Understanding fidelity from this spiritual perspective reveals it as something far more profound than mere rule-following or social obligation. True fidelity represents a conscious daily choice to evolve alongside another soul, committing to mutual growth even when that process becomes uncomfortable or challenging. Being faithful means saying yes to the relationship every single day, especially during difficult periods, choosing to resist momentary illusions in favor of building something much deeper and more lasting. This kind of commitment requires enormous spiritual courage because it demands that both partners face their shadows, heal their wounds, and develop the maturity to love without conditions or escape routes. The spiritual bond that develops through this conscious commitment transcends physical attraction, temporary emotions, or even personality conflicts. It becomes a sacred container for mutual evolution. The journey toward this level of authentic relationship challenges everything our culture teaches about love, requiring a complete transformation in mindset about what commitment actually means and why it matters for spiritual development. Write in the comments, I understand the deeper meaning, if you're beginning to see how these spiritual principles apply to every significant relationship in your life. Now, what happens when someone finally steps through that door of betrayal, reveals one of the most tragic illusions in human experience? The person committing adultery believes they're opening a pathway to freedom, excitement, and fulfillment that their marriage somehow denied them. But Edgar Cayce's spiritual revelations show us that what they actually discover on the other side is rarely what they expected or hoped for. Instead of liberation, most betrayers find themselves trapped in a new kind of prison, one constructed from anguish, emptiness, and profound regret. The road that begins with such thrilling excitement almost inevitably leads to a destination of loneliness and spiritual impoverishment that's far more devastating than whatever dissatisfaction drove them to seek escape in the first place. Behind this pattern lies a fundamental spiritual principle that governs all human actions: the law of vibrational consequences. Every gesture we make, every decision we choose, every word we speak creates energetic ripples that extend far beyond what we can see in the physical world. When someone engages in lies, manipulation, and the breaking of sacred marital commitments, they generate what Edgar Cayce described as dense, heavy energy that literally surrounds them and binds them to cycles of pain. This isn't about divine punishment or cosmic revenge. It's about the natural spiritual mechanics of how consciousness operates. The betrayer becomes trapped within the energetic field of their own deception, unable to experience genuine peace, authentic connection, or spiritual freedom until they develop the courage to seek real redemption and healing. The transformation out of this spiritual prison can only begin through what Edgar Cayce called the purifying fire of genuine repentance. This isn't the shallow regret that comes from being caught or facing consequences. It's the soul-deep recognition of the true damage they've caused, not just to others, but to their own spiritual integrity. When someone reaches the point where they can sit alone in silence and truly comprehend what they've lost through their betrayal, when they experience that crushing awareness of having destroyed something precious and irreplaceable, the regeneration process finally becomes possible. The tears they shed aren't just for the pain they've caused their spouse or family. They're mourning the death of their own innocence and the spiritual connection they severed through their choices. This is the moment where genuine spiritual learning begins, where the soul stops running from truth and starts the difficult but essential work of rebuilding authentic character from the foundation upward. Write in the comments, "I recognize this journey," if you're seeing how these spiritual principles reveal the hidden dynamics operating beneath the surface of human relationships. Now, what Edgar Cayce discovered about the spiritual mechanics of repeated betrayal reveals something that completely changes how we understand personal accountability and spiritual evolution. Those who choose to betray repeatedly without genuine remorse aren't just hurting others, they're actually accumulating increasingly difficult spiritual tests for themselves. The universe operates on a principle of escalating responsibility, where the more consciousness someone develops, the greater their accountability becomes for their choices. When someone persists in harmful patterns while fully aware of the damage they're causing, they delay their own spiritual evolution and create what Edgar Cayce described as more challenging future incarnations. The soul that refuses to learn through gentler lessons will eventually face circumstances that make learning unavoidable, because spiritual growth is ultimately non-negotiable in the cosmic order. But here's where the real transformation becomes possible for those who have been wounded. The betrayed spouse stands at a crossroads that offers two completely different destinies. She can choose to sink into resentment, bitterness, and the endless replaying of her pain, or she can rise into a dignity that elevates her entire spiritual trajectory. Both forgiveness and firm departure can represent acts of spiritual strength, depending on what her soul needs for growth. When forgiveness becomes possible, it represents one of the most powerful blessings available to human consciousness. But when forgiveness isn't accessible or appropriate, maintaining firm silence and boundaries becomes equally sacred, an act of self-love and faith that demonstrates incredible spiritual maturity in the face of devastating betrayal. The hidden truth that many people miss is that some marriages can actually be rebuilt after infidelity, but only under very specific spiritual conditions. Reconstruction becomes possible when there exists genuine truth-telling, authentic repentance, and unwavering commitment to real transformation. However, what absolutely cannot exist is forgiveness without fundamental change in the betrayer, because this creates a toxic cycle that imprisons both spirits in repeating patterns of pain. The impact of offering forgiveness to someone who hasn't genuinely transformed is that it enables continued deception and prevents the betrayer from facing the full consequences of their choices. This type of premature forgiveness actually becomes a disservice to both people, keeping them locked in dynamics that prevent real healing and growth. Behind every successful reconstruction lies a complete revolution in mindset, where both partners commit to becoming different people than they were when the betrayal occurred. Write in the comments, "Truth creates freedom," if you're understanding how authentic transformation becomes the foundation for genuine healing in these devastating situations. Now here's where Edgar Cayce's insights reveal the profound educational design behind these painful experiences. What appears to be random cruelty or inexplicable behavior often represents carefully orchestrated spiritual learning that spans multiple lifetimes. The person causing betrayal today might very well have been the victim of identical betrayal in a previous incarnation, and their current actions represent the universe's way of ensuring they understand both perspectives completely. This role reversal isn't about cosmic punishment, it's about comprehensive education. The soul that once experienced the crushing pain of abandonment needs to also experience the hollow emptiness that comes from being the one who abandons, because only through feeling both sides can true compassion and wisdom develop. These karmic learning cycles continue until the spirit genuinely understands the full impact of betrayal on all parties involved. The man who chooses to betray and abandon his family for temporary pleasures often faces a profound spiritual reckoning in future existences. According to Edgar Cayce's revelations, he will frequently be reborn into circumstances where he experiences the very abandonment and loneliness he once inflicted on others. He'll feel the cold absence of love, the confusion of being left behind, and the spiritual hunger for connection that he once dismissed as unimportant. This future solitude isn't designed as punishment, but as the most effective education available. The love he despised and took for granted becomes the lesson he'll desperately seek to understand, because the soul cannot evolve without comprehending the true value of authentic connection and commitment. Behind these patterns lies a fascinating communication system between human consciousness and universal wisdom. Every time someone chooses deception over truth, they essentially teach the universe that they haven't yet learned how to love authentically. The universe responds with infinite patience, offering new opportunities for growth, but it also creates increasingly clear mirrors that reflect back the consequences of these choices. When someone repeatedly flees from truth, the universe places before them the exact experiences they've been avoiding, because spiritual evolution requires facing reality rather than escaping into fantasy or self-deception. The journey toward genuine transformation demands that we stop running from the lessons that our souls need most. The impact of understanding these spiritual mechanics completely changes how we interpret the challenging relationships and painful experiences in our own lives, revealing them as precisely designed opportunities for consciousness expansion. Write in the comments, "I see the bigger picture now," if these revelations are helping you understand the spiritual purpose behind life's most difficult relationship experiences. Now, what Edgar Cayce revealed about divine protection for the innocent completely transforms how we understand the spiritual response to betrayal. The universe doesn't remain passive when someone suffers from infidelity. There's actually an entire support system operating behind the scenes that most people never realize exists. Every tear shed by a betrayed wife is witnessed and collected by spiritual benefactors who surround her with comfort, guidance, and invisible strength during her darkest moments. Meanwhile, every lie spoken by the betrayer creates a spiritual record that will eventually be reviewed when their consciousness awakens to truth. This isn't about divine judgment in the punitive sense, but rather about the natural spiritual accountability that governs all human actions. The impact of deception extends far beyond what we can see in the physical world, creating energetic imprints that must eventually be addressed and healed. Understanding infidelity from this broader spiritual perspective reveals that betrayal extends far beyond physical acts. There are forms of betrayal that begin with emotional omission, chronic disinterest, and the gradual withdrawal of authentic presence from the relationship. The man who stops listening to his wife, who no longer values her thoughts and feelings, who becomes emotionally absent while physically present, is already engaged in a form of betrayal through indifference. The spirit feels this emotional abandonment even when the body remains technically faithful, because authentic connection operates on levels much deeper than physical proximity. This emotional betrayal often creates the foundation for eventual physical infidelity, as the relationship becomes starved of the genuine attention and care that keep love alive. The journey toward authentic love requires what Edgar Cayce recognized as tremendous spiritual effort and courage. Loving someone Deeply isn't a passive experience. It demands active choice, consistent growth, and the willingness to face uncomfortable truths about ourselves. It's remarkably easy to flee when differences arise or when the relationship begins to challenge our ego's preferred self-image. But it requires genuine spiritual maturity to remain present, grow together, and allow love to transform both people involved. The spirit that chooses to truly love assumes one of the most challenging commitments available to human consciousness, the commitment to face its own shadows, heal its wounds, and build something luminous with another person. This process requires abandoning the illusion that love should always feel comfortable or easy. Write in the comments, "I'm ready for real love," if you're willing to embrace the spiritual courage that authentic relationships demand. Now here's what reveals the absolute futility of self-deception when it comes to betrayal. The unfaithful person might construct elaborate justifications, find countless reasons why their actions were understandable or even necessary, and surround themselves with people who validate their choices. They might convince themselves that they deserve happiness, that their marriage was suffocating, or that their spouse simply didn't understand them. But Edgar Cayce's spiritual insights reveal that in the silence of night, when all external voices quiet down, the soul knows exactly what happened. The spirit cannot be fooled by mental gymnastics or emotional rationalization. It knows they hurt someone who trusted them, knows they chose deception over truth, knows they fled from commitment when things became challenging. Even if the entire world applauds their newfound freedom or supports their decision to follow their heart, the spirit demands absolute honesty, and sooner or later they'll be forced to face the mirror of their authentic actions without any protective filters. Behind every choice we make operates the law of vibrational consequences that Edgar Cayce described as governing all spiritual reality. Nothing we do passes without effect in the invisible realms that surround and interpenetrate our physical world. When we plant seeds of lies and deception, we inevitably harvest crops of distrust and isolation. When we cultivate selfish pleasure at others' expense, we create future experiences of loneliness and disconnection that match the energy we've put into the world. The hidden truth is that only sincere love, when planted with complete honesty and watered with genuine commitment, can truly flourish into the kind of peace that satisfies the deepest hunger of the human spirit. Every betrayal carries a spiritual cost that extends far beyond immediate consequences or social judgment. While the body might experience temporary pleasure through extramarital encounters, the spirit feels the full weight of the violation, because authentic joy cannot be built upon a foundation of someone else's tears. The soul that chooses betrayal knows this truth, even when the conscious mind refuses to acknowledge it, even when the person flees from self-examination, even when they maintain a cheerful exterior. The spirit automatically contracts what Edgar Cayce called a vibrational debt that must eventually be balanced through direct experience of the pain they've caused others. This spiritual accounting system operates with perfect precision, creating future circumstances that will teach through personal experience what couldn't be learned, through conscious choice and moral consideration. Write in the comments, "The soul always knows," if you're recognizing how this inner spiritual truth operates beneath the surface of all our relationship decisions. Now, here's where Edgar Cayce's revelations reveal the ultimate spiritual principle governing all deception. Life simply doesn't sustain masks indefinitely, no matter how carefully constructed, how convincing to others, or how comfortable they become to wear. These false personas eventually crack under the weight of their own contradiction. When truth finally arrives, and it always does, it comes not as punishment, but as liberation for everyone involved. The transformation that occurs when reality pierces through years of deception creates an opportunity for authentic healing that was impossible while the lies remained in place. Being faithful, from this deeper perspective, isn't about achieving perfection or never feeling attraction to others. It's about choosing to remain whole, integrated, and honest. It means being able to look directly into the eyes of the person you love and say with complete sincerity, "I choose you, even when things get difficult, even when I'm tempted, even when my ego wants to flee." Marriage, according to Edgar Cayce's spiritual insights, represents far more than a physical or legal union. It's actually an alliance between two spirits engaged in a mutual learning project. Every challenge, conflict, and growth opportunity that arises within the relationship serves as curriculum designed to advance both souls toward greater wisdom and compassion. When someone chooses betrayal, they're essentially interrupting this sacred educational process. The impact of fleeing from these spiritual lessons creates a cycle where life must repeat the same themes through new relationships, different circumstances, and escalating challenges until the soul finally learns what it came here to understand. You can't graduate from spiritual school by skipping the most difficult classes. You can only delay your education and make the eventual learning more intense. Behind many cases of infidelity lies what Edgar Cayce described as spiritual amnesia, a profound forgetting of one's true identity, deepest commitments, and most precious accomplishments. The betrayer loses connection with who they really are, what they genuinely promised, and what they've actually built through years of shared experience. When they finally awaken from this spiritual sleepwalking, they often discover they've already destroyed something irreplaceable. Some losses carry a finality that no amount of regret can reverse, yet these devastating revelations still serve the soul's ultimate journey toward truth and authentic love. Write in the comments, "I choose wholeness," if you're ready to embrace the spiritual courage required to remain integrated and honest in all your relationships. If you've stayed with me through this entire journey into the hidden spiritual dynamics of betrayal and forgiveness, you've just experienced something that most people never get the chance to understand. These aren't just theoretical concepts, they're the actual spiritual mechanics operating behind the most painful and transformative experiences in human relationships. The insights Edgar Cayce shared about karma, spiritual contracts, and the soul's journey through love and loss provide a completely different lens for understanding why we experience what we do, and more importantly, how we can respond in ways that actually serve our highest spiritual growth. If this resonates with your own experiences or observations about relationships, you're definitely not here by accident. I create content like this regularly because I believe these deeper spiritual truths can genuinely transform how we navigate our most challenging life experiences. If you found value in what we've explored together today, I'd love to have you subscribe to the channel so you don't miss future insights that could be exactly what your soul needs to hear at the perfect moment. Leave me a comment saying, "This message was meant for me," if you feel like this information arrived in your life at precisely the right time. I always find it fascinating to see how these spiritual teachings find their way to the people who need them most. And if you felt that connection throughout our conversation today, a like on the video helps me know that this type of deep spiritual content is serving you well and should continue being part of what I share. There's a video right here that complements this topic perfectly, exploring how these same spiritual principles apply to attracting your true soulmate. Click and continue with me over there. You might discover that understanding the karma of betrayal is actually the key to recognizing authentic love when it arrives.